Can get going. Okay. Hi everyone. We're just getting totally sorted. I'm Ashley Koff, registered dietitian. If you're just joining for the first time, if you are a regular and catching us on YouTube later, just to remember that your questions will get answered. If you have questions and you're watching us live, we'll be able to answer them, of course. But if you ask any questions, I'll make sure that we can get our guests to answer them at a later date. And just a reminder that we'll go for about a half hour, 40 minutes here. And we'll start off the way that we always do, which is one, we're going to do an introduction. And then number two, we're going to start with a little lexicon of better nutrition, just to make sure that we're all using words and understand who our expert is and what the letters after her name mean and all of these good things. So without further ado, welcome, Sarah. I'm so thrilled to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Sarah, I want to dive right in. We're talking about weight loss. It is a tough conversation any which way that we have it. But of course, these days there are so many different options that are out there. When I did my pre-interview, it was very important to me to talk to an expert and somebody that really understood this. But a lot of experts in weight loss don't have a personal story associated. And I thought it was just awesome. And by way of introduction, if you were open to sharing your story in particular of how you went along your weight loss journey and how that influenced becoming a dietitian that specializes in this area.
Absolutely. So I actually love telling my story because I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for that. I was always obese growing up, and I was morbidly obese in high school, and I was next in line to get type 2 diabetes. I was pre-diabetic already, and I finally had my aha moment when my own mother was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And so when I went off to college, I vowed that I was not going to gain the freshman 15, and I started to cook for myself. I started to exercise more, and as the weight loss came off, the exercise increased, the dieting got, easier, and it took me all 4 years of college, but I lost about 125 pounds, and I've kept it off. Got married, had a baby, gained a little bit back, but we're almost there.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that story because I think so many people look for when is that time frame? And a lot of times people just rule out college as a time where we can actually lose weight, in that piece. So I thought you actually use a couple of terms right there. So as promised, I thought we'd dive into the Better Nutrition Lexicon. So let's start off with your credentials, what you've done to specialize in this area, and most recently CSOWM, so we can talk about that.
Yes.
And then I'd love for you to also define, and maybe you'll do it as you're going through. You mentioned that you were morbidly obese. These are tough phrases to either see written down or there, but we do have some clinical terms, and I'd love to just sort of go through what the actual definition of morbidly obese and obese is, and then we'll talk about why that might not even be that helpful as a term. But anyway, we'll dive into there. Sure. So your letters, we'll start there. Yeah.
So first off, I have a bachelor's degree in science from the University of Central Florida. Go Knights. Woo. Then I have my master's degree in dietetics and nutrition from Florida International University in Miami. I am a registered dietitian with the Academy, and that's nationally recognized. But most recently, I got certified as a specialist for obesity and weight management. This is a new credential that they released about 2 years ago, and so it's still fairly new. There are probably about, at this point, maybe 500 practitioners that have it, but it's interdisciplinary. So registered nurses can get it and so forth. It's recognized even in medicine. And it's for the specialty of obesity, weight management, all-encompassing for pediatrics and adults. And then I'm an LD as well. I live in the state of Texas, and in Texas, you're required to be a licensed dietitian to practice within that state. So I have a whole bunch of alphabet soup after my name, but every letter was deserved. And my whole mission from when I started to become a dietitian was to focus on weight, because I didn't become a dietitian until I lost my own weight, had my own journey. I like to tell my patients that I fell in love with food even more.
That's great. I love that. So tell us a little bit about, to get this degree, sorry, it's not a degree, this certification. What did you have to do? And was there anything surprising sort of in your experience just recently? Because you've been a dietitian for longer, and you're more, as you said, this is a new certification. Anything that sort of popped out as you as exciting or surprising?
Well, even when I was in my master's dietetic combined program, I thought that there should always be a specialty for weight management that never existed. There was for, diabetes, but why not for obesity? Obesity is a disease. And so I always questioned it. And when I heard that this came about, it was something I always had wanted to obtain. Now, in order to qualify to sit for the exam, you have to have at least 4,000 hours of face-to-face interaction directly involved in the field of obesity, weight management, bariatrics, etc. And then you have to have a recommendation from a supervisor. All of your hours have to be confirmed. Then you can qualify for the board exam. You take the board exam that's only offered a few times a year. And then based on your scores, you either pass or fail. You have to have a passing score in order to get the credential.
Awesome. So I think that's super important to anyone who's watching, either as a practitioner or, let's say, I have a lot of people in my audience who are fitness professionals and health coaches. When we are talking about weight management, it is really important that we, as you were mentioning, not just the disease element of it, but that we're not approaching it from a fad diet, but more of an experience. Somebody who's experienced 4,000 hours is a lot of hours, to acquire. So I think that's really important. So when we talk about obesity, there's morbid obesity, there's obesity, there's overweight, which I struggle a lot with this BMI definition of overweight, just because I think, weight for height isn't telling you anything about is your body muscular or how you're allocating that, but we'll dive into that part. And then you also—
It's not a fair assessment.
Yeah, and you also mentioned bariatrics, which I really want to help people understand what are the different tools that are available in weight management today, especially at the clinical level. So let's define obesity, morbid obesity, and we'll discuss then what bariatrics is.
Okay, sure. So obesity is defined with weight status using BMI, which is recognized in the medical field. BMI is an equation between your height and your weight. And when you figure it out, you get a score, a number, and it puts you into certain categories. So less than 18 is considered underweight or malnourished. And then 18 to 24 is considered healthy, of healthy weight. I call the 18s and 19s Hollywood weight. But in bariatrics, the field of weight loss and metabolic surgeries, we go by ideal body weight. That we set at 25 because it's a very small sector of the population is of normal weight. So 25 to 30, you're considered overweight. Greater than 30 to 35, you're considered obese, and then over 40, you become morbidly obese. So other medical terms you may hear are obesity stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. It's the degree of severity that's associated with it. Now, with increasing BMI, increasing obesity, you're greater risk for a lot of chronic illnesses.
I think that's so important, because what we're talking about here is a math equation, very important for, clinical classification. Insurance obviously needs it, so we can figure out, are some of these things going to be insurance reimbursed? But when we actually look at your health, metabolic health, we know that actually isn't falling along, especially when you're in that 25, as you said, like the ideal, 25 to 30 in the overweight, but even in the 30 to 35, as somebody who's worked with professional athletes and military professionals and things like that. So one of the other things that you mentioned was you were pre-diabetic. So let's talk a little bit about, in the assessment of obesity, and really as we start to dive into how we should figure out the right weight loss or the right weight management tool for somebody. What role does the assessment of where they are in metabolic health, so with, with different diseases, play in that assessment?
Sure. So after studying for my exam and reading the most recent literature reviews from a lot of different medical and different societies, basically, because obesity is now being recognized as a disease, in order to receive the diagnosis, they're no longer going to base it off of BMI alone, right, because of that muscle to fat ratio with people who are more athletic, etc. And so what they want now is dual assessment, where it's not only going to be BMI, but you also need to have the associated increased waist circumference. Mm-hmm. And waist circumference will vary based on your ethnic background. So, for example, people of Asian descent have a smaller waist circumference in general than people of American descent and so forth. And so you need to have both a high BMI and exceed the weight circumference ratio in order to be classified as obese, and then the stage will proceed.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I mean, we see all the time, like I've got a good side, a good backside. Like my butt's not going to talk to me about, metabolically what's really an issue. But if my belly's hanging over, I have to pay more attention to that. So, I think the ethnic diversity, and I think just structurally, we know, I have friends who physically look, much more, it's that, the body.
We're all built.
Yeah, we're built different.
And that's giving you more of a picture.
Right.
But also when it comes to being obese or overweight, central adiposity, which is that fat that's around your midsection, that's more indicative of those chronic illnesses. And so that's giving us a better picture of your health status, which is why initially they started using BMI.
Yeah, I think that's so smart. As somebody who worked in Hollywood for 15 years, where you were saying like the Hollywood 18-19, I would have somebody who was, maybe an 18-19 or maybe now aging, they're at a 20, but they were noticing that the belly fat is starting to come on. And so I think that's such an important area to pay attention to. So let's move over then into, so if we are aware, and we usually are aware, that we're dealing with our weight on that part, and I'm going to come back to, for everyone listening, I'm going to come back to the conversation around pregnancy weight gain that you were mentioning, and also around that college time period, because I find those fascinating. But I want to understand, we have a lot of tools available to us today. So bariatrics, there are a lot of different surgical and non-surgical options. And then there are what we will call medically supervised programs. So can you go through the different tools in the toolkit of what you might consider for somebody other than just saying like, hey, come in and go keto or go on a diet? What are some of the tools? Yeah.
Absolutely. So there are different tools and they serve different purposes depending on what your status and health condition is. Bariatrics of itself is considered a weight loss and a metabolic surgery. It's because it affects your metabolism. It's not just working on your stomach. There's the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass. There's the biliopancreatic diversion duodenal switch. There's the gastric sleeve or the vertical sleeve, and there's the adjustable gastric band. Now, other things that they're doing within that realm of bariatric surgeries are also the vagal nerve block, V-block, which is a neurotransmitter that can be implanted to send signals to the brain telling you that you're full. This will be adjusted periodically. There's non-surgical options such as the gastric balloon. There's single, dual, and triple balloons that you can do. That can be an outpatient procedure, or it can be done in a doctor's office depending on their qualifications. And then there's very low calorie diets, or all liquid diets, or supplement only diets where you're controlled but you're being medically monitored because they're continually checking your labs and your heart status to make sure that everything's still in balance, but you're at such a calorie deficit. This is not something that's recommended to do on your own. And so by definition, a very low calorie diet is 800 calories or less. A low calorie diet is 800 calories or more. Now, when you are trying to lose weight, the literature also says that if you decrease your calories too much, then that's not beneficial either. And so this is something that needs to be medically managed. So that would have to apply to the low calorie diet. But in my scope of work, when I was studying for the exam, I found that, interestingly enough, that it does not matter which diet you follow, keto, paleo, Atkins, South Beach, Mediterranean, DASH, etc. Does not matter the frequency. It doesn't matter the timing. The only thing that matters at the end of the day for weight loss is calorie deficit. And so if you look at all of the popular fad diets, they just change around the macronutrient composition to lead to a calorie deficit. And so it has to be a marriage between exercise and diet to really achieve those goals and maintain them. And so you have to incorporate both of those factors.
It's so important. And so I think, obviously if you're eating all fats, which is double the amount of calories of protein and carbohydrate, you might have to eat a lot less in order, to get that calorie deficit. It is interesting when we talk about weight loss. Are there any of the tools, you were saying it doesn't matter what diet, are there any of the tools that you've seen that are better for, so while the real goal is losing fat, right? We want to lose the fat and retain our lean body mass, which,
Absolutely.
On that part. And so I think, I guess a question would be, are there ways to either rejigger to pay attention to macros, or to are there any of the tools that are better for accelerating that, especially for people who have tried a lot of diets before?
So absolutely, because when you go on extreme diets, a lot of it is water fluctuations. And so, it's not about weight loss. It needs to be about fat loss. And with my patients, I don't want them to lose weight. I want them to get rid of it. I don't want them to find it again. And so in order to establish that, it takes adherence, commitment. And so whatever means they use to achieve that calorie deficit is the best diet for them. So some people do very well with low carb or low fat, but it has to be sustainable. And so each person is individual, and there isn't a blanket statement. There's not healthy is different for every single person. And so it has to work with them. So if they can sustain intermittent fasting, then that's a wonderful thing if it's sustainable. Whatever means to achieve that calorie deficit. But as dietitians, and you can vouch for this too, I don't advocate for eliminating any food group. No one nutrient is going to give you everything your body needs. And so it all has to be about that balance and moderation. Yeah.
And that's why with a lot of the surgeries, it's so important to know what is happening to your body so that we can adjust for that part. So the role of the dietitian, you play an incredible role in determining this, especially from the insurance standpoint. And I think that this is really important for people to understand, because you have to have a medical license, and I believe you have to be a dietitian or approved. No, I believe it has to be by a dietitian for an insurance to approve a bariatric program. So any of the surgical or non-surgical.
Correct.
So take us through what you do as an assessment to help, if somebody goes to their doctor and they say, we think you're a good candidate for the balloon, or we think you're a good candidate for a Roux-en-Y, or for any of these, they then come to you, and what does that assessment look like?
So I'm going to do a full nutrition assessment, take the full background on nutrition history, medical history, eating patterns, dietary patterns, food likes, dislikes, eating behaviors, activity, the whole gamut. I'm going to get a feel for, the diets that you've gone on and failed or succeeded with, your barriers, what environment you live on. If you have a good support system, it's quite thorough, the assessment that we do prior. Now, some insurance require weight loss prior to see adherence, but really you have to adopt behavior change. When I come and I see the patients, I let them know that, listen, bariatric surgery is not the easy way out. In fact, it's even harder. You have to relearn how to eat, and you've been eating a certain way for X number of years, and it's going to take time. And so we teach them these pillars and foundations of what that healthy diet is so that they can be successful after. But I tell them that the bariatric surgery, the gastric balloon, the V-block, those are only a tool. When you come to the dietitian, we give you the blueprints, the roadmap, but you're the one that has to perform the construction. And it's up to you whether you build a tree house or a mansion. And so that's how you have to consider it, because a lot of people have a negative outlook on bariatric surgery, but they only hear the poor stories, but it's lack of adherence. They didn't take their vitamins. They didn't follow the diet recommendations, et cetera, et cetera. And it's only a tool. It's how you use that tool. And that dietitian is here to work with you and individualize and customize that plan so that you can make those changes.
That's fantastic. I think it's so important. And it's a great lead in. You were saying the tool and being able to use it and be in that space. So a lot of times there's desperation. You know, we've tried and we failed, or we have an experience, or we're worried about, you know, are we going to be around for our grandchildren or for our children, you know, that kind of a thing. But you talked about, and you also shared this personally as it related to your pregnancy and losing weight on that part, that if you're not ready, that any of these are not going to be better options. So talk a little bit about that. How do you assess, or said differently, what are some of the steps someone can take to get ready? You went to college and you were like, it's not going to be me. Like, I'm not going to, you know, get diabetes like my mom. What are some of those pieces that can, you know, absent having an experience like that, that can actually help someone get to that ready phase to commit?
So, you know, when we look at behavior change, there's the stages of change model, you know, the contemplation, pre-contemplation, action. You know, where are you really? You know, how much do you value your health over those bad behaviors? And you have to weigh the situation. If you love eating and if you love food, then that's wonderful. But you have to understand what's going to come along with that. And so, you know, nothing's ever free, and there's a give and take with everything. But when you realize that, you know, the results are worth so much more, that's when you enter into that action phase. And that's when it's going to be realistic and sustainable and your new lifestyle, because this is how you want to proceed on with life.
And even some of that, I love this, what you shared with me. So I'm actually looking down at my page, everybody, because you typed it all out. But even some of that, you can be so committed and ready, and then life hits you with these saboteurs, right? So saboteurs can be of our own doing. So I thought you broke it up into 6 different areas. You know, things on the calendar, the clock, coworkers, family and friends, spouses, and then yourself. And so I thought what we would do now is kind of walk through those different areas. I'll prompt you so you don't have to look down. I've got the notes in front.
No worries.
But I feel like these are really important areas for anyone to understand, and really to map out a plan for with your dietitian, with your therapist. And you know, my belief system based on what you laid out here, and, you know, as somebody who's also worked in bariatrics in the past is, and just with general weight loss, you have to have a plan for this before you start going down the path. Otherwise, when we experience saboteurs and they unfortunately sabotage us, it's much harder to get back on the path than if you have a plan for it. So let's start with the calendar. How does the calendar act as a saboteur to our weight loss efforts? Yeah.
Okay. So every single month there's a holiday. Yeah. New Year's, Easter, Mardi Gras, Passover, you know, every single month.
Bowl games.
Christmas, football games. Like, there's always going to be something on the calendar. There's always an event and a holiday. And then also National Pie Day, or, you know, National Donut Day, which is a thing apparently. And so the calendar can be a diet saboteur. Oh, so, you know, you're going to be celebrating such and such holiday coming up. So, for example, if you're celebrating Passover and you're giving up bread, doesn't mean you should eat a whole bunch of bread because you have to give it up for such amount of time, or it's Easter and I need to have all the chocolate in my basket. So the calendar can be a big diet saboteur. So you're going to have to pick and choose, what's really worth it, because there is something every month.
Yeah. And I feel like that's a great tie-in. I'm going to leapfrog over the clock for a second. It's a great tie-in to coworkers, and then also thinking about school age, right? Or, your sorority, or, depending on where someone's at. What goes on with coworkers that can be a sabotage in that part? Yeah.
So a lot of offices like to build community amongst their coworkers, because you want to work in a happy and great environment. And so the coworker, they have their birthdays, or they bring in things from their children. My kids are selling Girl Scout cookies, or my son is a Boy Scout and is selling popcorn. And so you can feel that pressure from your coworkers. Oh, we're all going out to lunch for Chinese food on Friday. Are you coming? And those are all forms of sabotage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you have to be aware. Can't be upset and treat other people. You can't change them. You can only change yourself. And so that if you bring your lunch, then you won't have to go to lunch at that Chinese food. Or if you tell them, I'm really trying to get healthy. I really hope your, son, daughter, whatever, does well with their sales. You might want to try Sally in, accounting or something like that. And so, you passed over the clock, but the clock is, oh my gosh, it's 12 o'clock. I have to eat. It's lunchtime. And so that's also not true. You do have to eat 3 times a day, but you can't live by the clock. You can't, that's not your hunger scale, your hunger cue.
Yeah. And I think personalizing it too, I've had people who don't eat lunch at quote unquote lunchtime, and then they overeat later because they're like, I didn't really have lunch. And I was like, you still had a pit stop. You grabbed a handful of nuts and an apple. It wasn't lunch, a meal, but that meal versus snack. And I think going back to your Chinese food, and the cookies and things like that, you can always donate money if somebody wants the money on that part, right?
So I'm a Girl Scout, and I have to tell you, anytime I see a Girl Scout by the grocery store, I cringe, because I'm like, oh, those cookies are yummy.
Yeah.
But I give a donation.
Yeah.
And I say, listen, here's my $4. That's how much they cost by me.
Right.
And I was like, you girls can have the cookies or give them as samples, but I believe in your cause. I don't have to have those cookies.
Yeah. And I feel like at the Chinese place, et cetera, one of the things, again, you can work on with your dietitian would be, if you do want to, because sometimes it's important to go out to eat for work. Are you working on, especially if you've had a surgery, what are options what are choices that you could make? Yeah.
So I'll go over with my patients how to, make healthier eating decisions while eating out. Chinese food does not have to mean fried rice. There's so much on the menu that you probably have never read because you order the same 3 things, but we can work together to pick out that better option, whether it's Mexican or fast food or whatnot.
Got it. So we had 2 here. One's family and friends, and one's the spouses. So what I want to do is I want to separate out friends, because I honestly believe friends can be your better health enablers, or they can be your destroyers, your saboteurs on this part. And then I'll come back to family, because I want to kind of break up family, spouse versus kids.
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead. So let's talk about friends.
So friends, we all have that one friend who will always go to the gym with you, who will, make up the best salad and drink a protein shake along with you. But we also always have that friend who wants a brownie sundae, or who wants to order pizza, or who likes to go out to eat sushi and so forth. And so it's not that they're malintended, not all the time. Sometimes, there may also be jealousy that could arise if you're losing weight and maybe they're not. But you can only affect you. And if you know that this is the friend that likes to go out to eat or so forth, you can bring along your food with you, eat beforehand, or suggest a different activity that doesn't center around food. And if it's the friend that loves to exercise, make more plans to hang out with them, because that that they'll help you achieve your goals. But friends, it's not always, so clear where they're coming from, but they do mean well most of the time. And so, if they want to go out to eat, you pick the restaurant.
I think that's so important. I remember once being at a presentation and somebody said, look, you can go to the bar, go to the bar and just get water and or have a mocktail that's unsweetened. And I just sat there. I was like, yes, you can, but that is asking for exponential willpower. And it also maybe puts the other person uncomfortable. Whereas if you had said, hey, I'm not drinking right now, could we instead meet for a walk, or could we meet for tea, or, could I have you over? So I love that, point of shifting the location instead of trying to demand, I don't believe in putting yourself in scenarios that demand high levels of willpower, because I think there's a good chance that you're not going to have that high level, right? And I take that personally.
Yourself is a saboteur as well.
Yeah. So that it's a great point, and we will conclude with that part. So the family one, I wanted to split up into spouses and kids. I know obviously we have grandparents and aunts and uncles and things like that we could also talk about, but your kids, we don't like to think of them as a saboteur, but sometimes they're not actually the saboteur. It's what we're doing. We make them the saboteur. Explain a little bit more about that. Yeah.
So sometimes children are picky eaters. And so we'll give them all these foods and they won't eat it. And who eats it? We eat it because they left it behind. When I had my son, I gained a lot of weight during my pregnancy, but I vowed that no matter what, I will not eat food off of his plate. Even if it was a spoonful out of a yogurt and the yogurt's still good, I will either throw the yogurt away or give the food to my dogs. I will not eat their share of food. I will not eat off of his plate. And this was a vow, and I still keep it. And it's hard, but, I want to be there for my son. So I know that, being healthy and managing my weight is more important than having his last chicken nugget. But, in that same sense, a lot of our patients or my patients say, I have kids at home and they like chips and cookies and they like to eat pizza. Well, you can also tell them, chips and pizza and cookies are great, but so are healthier foods. And teach them to eat healthier foods also. There's nothing wrong with snacking on carrots and hummus or an apple with a little bit of nut butter if you're not having a nut allergy. And so children are going to model what you show them and teach them. And if you're giving them chips and cookies, they'll want chips and cookies. And if you're giving them carrots and peppers and they don't want that, maybe they're not hungry. And it's okay if they're not hungry. My pediatrician told me when my son was really young, because he was very little, I was concerned about his eating. Dietitian and mom kicked in. And he's like, babies are great regulators of their intake. When they're hungry, they will eat. When they're not, they won't. Same thing with kids and same thing with teens. When they are hungry, they will eat. Teens will eat. When they're not, you won't. So don't hung yourself up on the little moments, and don't always just have bad food for them. Have good food for them too.
I love it. Rachel commented, she said, better to waste it than have it on your waist. I think we totally agree, Rachel, totally on that part. And I think, I have a lot of my clients, and I think you were talking about this as well, where they'll say well, but I don't want, to raise my kids where they feel like some foods are bad or whatever. And I'm like, that's totally fine. Make going out for ice cream something that you do, make going out for pizza something that you do. And obviously you can make healthy pizzas at home, but I think the notion of not having it in the house where it's so readily available because you can't so much control for what else is out there. I think that's just awesome advice on that part. Yeah,
absolutely. They're going to go to friends' houses. They're going to go to parties and be exposed to it. And again, there's nothing they can't have. It's all about moderation.
Right.
And, if you give them, some say, they'll make those healthier decisions.
Yeah. So going back to us and our partners. So partners, spouses, the folks we live with, roommates, how do we set up, boundaries without making somebody feel like, I don't want to turn around and say I can't have chocolate in the house because my boyfriend likes to, come home and have a piece of chocolate and he can eat one piece. And if I have a chocolate bar in the house, I eat the whole chocolate bar. So it's hard in that way. So what are some of your recommendations from a spouse point? Yeah.
My husband I love him to death.
Yeah.
We just celebrated our 3-year anniversary yesterday.
Yay.
Yeah. And so he's always like, oh, let's go get ice cream, or I want Chinese food, or I want chocolate, or I'm, craving blah, blah, blah. And I tell him all the time, honey, I can't control myself. We can't have that in the house. We can't do such things. So I've developed a kind of way around this to, have this happy marriage. We're 3 years still on the newer side. But what I do is, I love a sale just as much as my husband does. So when there's a sale on a candy that I don't like, I'll buy it for him. And then
Right.
I'm less likely to eat it because I know it's a candy that I don't like. And so, after Easter, after, Halloween, things like that, I'll get, gummy candies that he's a fan of that are sour. And I'm like not into that. And so it's okay to have those around the house because I won't eat them.
Yeah.
But also out of sight, out of mind. And so, he likes chocolate and I like chocolate. But what I do is I keep the chocolate in the freezer. So it's out of sight and out of mind. And then if I do go and I see it, it's frozen. And so it takes me longer to eat. And so I actually am more mindful and satisfied when I do have it.
And is he okay with the frozen, like with him saying like he's fine to say like then I'll defrost it and just have it like that?
Yeah, he's just like chocolate.
Yeah,
that's all that matters to him.
Yeah.
But so that's another thing. And then I occasionally with some gal pals, I'll go on like, mini contests with each other where we'll say, you can't have more than one sweet a week. Like one sweet day a week, because sometimes we eat sweets multiple days. And if you do, you have to buy the other person a pedicure.
Nice.
And so I did this with one of my girlfriends, and we do this around the holiday time because there's, so many parties we're going to. And if we eat sweets every day, it's not friendly on our waist. And so you can only have one day a week, and we have to tell the other person the day. So we're accountable. I told my husband this, and he stopped offering me ice cream and chocolate, and because he's like, it's bad enough that I have to pay for your pedicure. Yeah. I don't want to pay for someone else's also. Yeah. So once I kind of explained that to him, he was also on board. Yeah. So the roommate, the spouse, whomever it may be that you live with, there are ways around it, and you can explain to them too. I can't control myself. I can't stop you from eating, but it would be helpful if you ate ice cream not next to me in the living room, if you ate it on your own, or if you got a bar and just, kept it away so that I didn't get into it.
I love it. Okay, so we've gone a little bit over on time, but I have to make sure that we get in the self, because this is the one that I think is psychologically the hardest part to keep us being successful. Is for whatever reason we know what reasons. There's so much failure associated with weight management, and like I always say, like if you got a car and the car didn't work, like if some aspect of the car didn't work, then you would, there's a law, like it's a lemon and you return that car. But whatever diets are out there that we try and programs, if it doesn't work, we consider ourselves a failure. And so we're carrying on our shoulders a lot of failure around this. And I think what happens, my experience, and when you were talking about this self piece, is that every time we experience one of these self-sabotage moments, we're tapping into that failure. So it actually becomes exponential. So talk about, I think your self-saboteur conversation is just awesome. So talk about what some of those are and these tips to how to get around it. I love it.
So the I deserve this is the big self-saboteur. Well, if you've worked so hard to achieve a weight loss goal or milestone or exercise goal, then is that whatever you XYZ item you're going to eat going to change the situation? You may deserve it, but in the end, are you going to feel good about your decision in doing that? Another thing would be that I worked so hard today and I didn't have a chance to eat a real meal. Well, if you meal planned and meal properly, then that wouldn't be self-sabotage. Or if you get on the scale and you saw that you lost a couple of pounds, doesn't mean that you can reward yourself by eating more that next day. And so I try to practice this with myself, and I tell this to a lot of my patients. Just because you forget to brush your teeth in the morning doesn't mean you're going to throw your toothbrush away. Doesn't mean you're never going to brush your teeth ever again. So you did have that slip up. Don't let that slip up be the opening of the floodgates. Don't make a bad situation worse. And so some people, myself included, self-sabotage. Oh, well, I already had pizza. I might as well also have ice cream and cake. But it goes to that same situation. Are you never going to brush your teeth again? You brush your teeth when you remember. You brush your teeth before bed. And so a lot of my patients laugh when I say that. And, doesn't really, it clicks and they get it. But I'm like, even use your cell phone as an example. If you crack your cell phone screen, does that mean you're going to throw your phone in the pond? Or you're going to run over your phone? Your phone's still going to work with a cracked screen. So don't make the crack worse. And it's hard to tell yourself that. And we sabotage ourselves, and then we feel like extreme failures. And then we're like, oh, well, I already did worse. Don't make it worse. And this is a learning curve, and I'm still battling it myself, but I can catch it now. For example, if I used to weigh every day, and depending on the number on the scale, it would affect my mood. Now I weigh once a week, and I don't let that sabotage.
When you say you don't let it sabotage you, I think that's really the kicker, which is, what are some of the things? I love the toothbrushing analogy, right? Because if I realize that I brush my teeth, then what I'm going to do is like go brush my teeth, right? So it's like go get back on the horse, eat something good, drink some water, exercise, whatever. How do you put one foot forward when you have done something where that's either mentally you're on the verge of the self-sabotage mentally, or something is in front of you? Like, is it breathing? Is it checking a phone? Like, what helps you switch? Yeah.
Everyone's like, tomorrow. There's always a tomorrow. There's a tomorrow. Now. Do it now. What are you doing now? Could you march in place right now? Could you do some jumping jacks? Could you go brush your teeth instead of, eating? Could you walk your dog? Distract yourself. Ask yourself, am I really hungry? If society only ate when we were hungry, we would not have obesity or overweight problems. But we eat because the calendar, we eat because the clock, we eat because the family, the friends, the spouse, because of our mood, etc. And so, just listening to your own body and just being mindful. It's okay to have a slice of pizza. The world isn't going to end. Just make your next meal better.
I love that. I love that. So do not wait for tomorrow. Fix it right now. Sarah, this is awesome. I could talk to you for 20 more hours, and I'm sure that our viewers could.
Thank you.
We will, I'll direct everyone over to Appetite Health. Really check out the website. If you're a practitioner, physician, if you're somebody who thinks somebody should be evaluated, or want to start referring your patients to Sarah for evaluation for, if it's bariatrics or just for, what might be right from a protocol standpoint, she's an incredible resource. And I look forward to having everybody get to know you and watching this. If you are just joining us here live on Facebook, you can check out all the Better Nutrition interviews here in our video section. If you're on YouTube and you liked what you saw, please give us a thumbs up. And most importantly, we're doing this for free. We are sharing this with everyone. Please help us share this. The reason for the expert interviews is I want to help people cut down on the clutter and on the failure of trying things that don't work. And so by directing and introducing you to experts in their field, I hope that you will be able to help other people who you think might benefit from watching this conversation as well. Thank you for all the hearts and for the thumbs up. Rachel, thank you so much for your comment. We love the better to waste it and not have it on your waist. And for right now, we're signing off. I'll catch everyone on Friday, and I look forward to seeing you, Sarah, at some point at a conference or something like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you again.
Great. Take care.